Welcome back to Sold Out Sports Talk on AFR Talk. Roman Gabriel III getting you ready for your second half of your sports weekend. That's right, the passion of sports, faith, family, and sports here as we spread the gospel of Jesus Christ through people who get it. And that's sports figures, coaches, athletes, those who cover sports and entertainment, reaching young people today for the Lord. And just want to let you know, join us on Facebook, 2 words, Sold Out. Have a great time there. We'll Twitter at Sold Out 41, 1 word. And, of course, you can listen to this program in over 200 stations across the country. Just check AFR.net, our site for the station in your area, or streaming live at AFR.net. Don't forget, if you happen to miss us, I know you got family things going on out there. Maybe you got your kids playing a little b-ball or you're out with your wife. No big deal. All you got to do is go to Sold Out Sports Talk on AFR.net at the archive page. Click and hear full interviews right here from some great people. And, of course, no different today coming in with us. We've had a couple of his contemporaries on. As you know, I'm all about individual sports and about extreme sports like skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding. That's so huge in our culture today with young people. I've had Brian Sumner on this show, if you remember. Josh Harmony, of course, we had his music on, which was a lot of fun. But today I've got a guy who, well, he's a pioneer in skateboarding. Of course, pioneer is a good word for a guy who's been around for a while, too. He's the pastor of the sanctuary in Huntington Beach, an area that I absolutely loved growing up in Southern California. His ministry is dynamic. He speaks and preaches with great passion. Hung out with some guys like Tony Alva, Steve Olson, and others early on, guys that paved the way. This is way before the Extreme Games and X Games and ESPN and all that stuff. Our guest, Jay Hailip. Pastor Jay, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Great to be with you this morning or tonight or whenever it is we're on here. Good to be with you.
We're on 2 coasts. That's the beauty of this thing, man. You're out there on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast out here. But same things. Very excited about having you in. Of course, enjoyed so much your friend Brian Sumner. He's been in, and Josh Harmony. I really get a kick out of talking to these guys and about the passion that you all have for young people. Your story is not unique to a lot of athletes. I mean, you had a lot of success at an early age, did a lot of great things in the skateboard world, and we're going to talk about a little bit about your life. But first of all, in just watching you preach and listening to some of your sermons on your website, absolutely incredible passion. And tell me about the sanctuary and about what's going on there.
Well, God's doing incredible things in the sanctuary. 9 years ago, actually, my wife and I, our family, I lived out here as a skater when I was a lot younger, and I left here, got saved, gave my life to Jesus while I was gone, and God sent me back here to start this church 9 years ago. We started in a community center with a handful of people, and it's just amazing. The last 3 years, 3 to 4 years, the church has grown by 500%. It's just exploded. And, you know, the beautiful thing about what God is doing in our church is that all of the growth that is happening, it's not from people coming from other churches or who have been saved for a long time. I mean, the leaders in our church, the deacons in our church, some of the pastors in our church, the people who serve, different team leaders, they are people that we actually got saved and raised them up. And now they're serving Jesus in the church. And when you come to our church, it's huge. I mean, it's extremely diversified. I mean, it's not all cookie cutter. It's not all one kind of person. I guess one of the kind of core values, if you want to call it, that one of the core values of our church would be to help people who can't help us back. You know, we've got a lot of, when you come into our church, you wouldn't know it, but you know, some of the people on our worship team used to be strippers. There are girls, ladies in our church that used to be prostitutes that are now greeters, ushers, guys who were like hardcore gang members that got tattoos on their face. You know, they're in our church. And like, for example, one time there was a service, literally there was a service in our church where there were 3 shopping carts parked in front of our church, homeless guys with all their belongings in those shopping carts. They pulled them up into parking by the front door of the church, and there's a Bentley in the parking lot, and everybody in between. And that's kind of what our church is like. You got pro athletes, you got people from the entertainment industry, there are homeless people there, there are gang members there are business professionals there. You know, it's a beautiful thing of what Jesus is doing there.
Pastor Jay Hailip is our guest. Huntington Beach, the sanctuary, and sounds a little like Brooklyn Tabernacle in New York and what they did there. Just taking the area that they were in and taking advantage of the resources and the people that were around them and making their church open to anybody and everybody. And you know, that sounds like kind of trite, but the bottom line is that's not true about some churches in our country. Is that the type of people that need Christ and that need him the most, which is everybody, but then you're talking about people who can't help themselves. I mean, that's Jesus. That's what he did. That's who he was. And he went outside the four walls and he did that. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, they talk about your career. I mean, you've been a long while. You're like me, man. You're not new to the block when it comes to skateboarding. When people ask me about what football did for me in terms of my life, it did everything. I mean, introduced me to Christ, introduced me to Spirit-filled teammates that I now, you know, still visit with today that are in ministry. It just set me up with a foundation for the rest of my life through something that I loved, but realized that wasn't and didn't need to be the first thing in my life, that God needed to be the first thing. And for those out there that haven't heard your testimony in terms of what skateboarding has done for your life, Jay, talk about the passion of that sport, about how you got into it and what it's done for you.
Well, I was somewhere around the age of 10 years old, and I think I was 10 when I got a skateboard for Christmas. And I remember I went outside and started skateboarding in my driveway, and it literally just took off from there. You know, I began to skate ditches and make ramps, and you know, started going to the skate parks, and literally, you know, I am a skater. You know, skateboarding wasn't just something that I did. You know, I am a skater. I skated my whole life. Getting that skateboard literally changed everything about my destiny, my future. And, you know, the guys I was looking at in the magazines when I first started skating, they literally were like my heroes in the skateboard world. All of those guys ended up becoming some of my best friends. And, you know, when I was real young, I started getting sponsored. I adapted to skating pretty quick, you know, and I was able to kind of excel in it. And within a short period of time, I began to be sponsored and, you know, ended up getting on the cover of magazines like Thrasher magazine and started writing for some of the biggest companies in the world. And at the same time, you know, while, you know, I'm rising through the ranks of skating, you know, I was dabbling in drugs and started doing drugs at an early age. And eventually that began to override even my passion to skateboard, and ultimately it robbed me of everything. And so, you know, skateboarding literally, it opened up a lot of doors, you know, and put me in places. But at the same time, the lifestyle that I was living and the people that I was running with, you know, it was like I was sabotaging my own success.
Jay Hailip, Pastor Jay, is with us from the sanctuary in Huntington Beach. He's now a pastor, of course, a great background in skateboarding. And, you know, a lot of people talk about that one person in their life that made a difference. I know who those were for me. Who was the biggest influence in terms of leading you to Christ, in terms of you coming to that point in your life where you were ready to do that?
Well, God put a man in my path. And actually, because what happened was that, you know, here I reached this point of success in skating, but I'd gotten turned on to cocaine when I was 15. I'd actually started doing drugs and alcohol earlier than that. Primarily, you know, smoking pot was the main thing that I did. But when I got turned on to cocaine at 15, that really, it was like somebody cranked the volume knob up in my life and broke it off and threw it away. And cocaine just took me over. And so what happened was I left California thinking that if I can just get away from the people that I'm hanging out with and the whole lifestyle that I'm living, you know, that I can change my life. and get my life back on track. So I went to Alabama because that's originally where I'm from. And I went to Alabama, and, of course, the problem wasn't so much my geographical location as it was inside me. And so I went to Alabama, and God put this man in my path, and he's like my spiritual father. He's still one of my best friends today. He's the mayor of a town in Alabama, and you know, God just put him in my path, and he began to share Jesus with me in a way I'd never heard anybody talk about Jesus. This man began to tell me about how Jesus had transformed his life and about how he had been actually an alcoholic. And I'm looking at this guy because to a degree at that moment I knew who he was. He was a well-known businessman. He was an entrepreneurial kind of guy, owned several different companies. And like I said, he's now the mayor of a town in Alabama. And so I'm listening to this man tell me about Jesus in a way I'd never heard anybody talk about Jesus. And it really captivated and blew me away. And his name is Charles Gilchrist. And I remember as I was listening to him, I just asked him, I said, how do I get saved? And I really didn't know what saved meant. If you would have said, hey, Jay, are you saved? I would have thought, you know, saved from what? Who's after me? And when I asked him that question, I remember he looked at me and he said, do you want to be saved? And I remember thinking to myself, I said, well, if this is what I got to do to go to heaven, I thought, yeah, I want it. And in my mind, because I didn't grow up in church really, and I didn't know anything about the Bible, never read the Bible, I remember thinking, well, this would be awesome. I will pray and get saved, and I'll go, because actually I was on my way to do a drug deal. And I thought, I'll go meet this guy and do my drug deal. This would be awesome. And that man opened up his Bible to Romans chapter 10, verses 9 and 10, read those two verses to me that says, if you believe in your heart that God has raised Jesus from the dead and confess him with your mouth, you'll be saved. And I remember he read those verses to me, and he led me in a prayer of asking Jesus Christ to come into my life and to forgive me of my sins. And when I prayed that prayer, I felt the hurt, the pain, the weight, all the wrong I'd ever done. I just felt it literally lift off of me. And I was radically transformed right there in that moment. And I was a drug addict.
Hold in there. We're gonna go to a short break, and we're gonna come back with Pastor Jay, and we're gonna talk more about his experiences as a skateboarder and also how he's using that today in his church and in his community to make a difference through sports and through skateboarding when we come back on Sold Out Sports.